Hi, welcome back, third grade friends. It's Mr. Lake with today's lesson. Today we'll be working on lesson 10 in ELA. If you'll follow along with me, I'll read our intention and our success criteria for today. We are learning to describe how one part of a story builds on another. We will be successful when we can identify transition words that show sequence, explain the sequence of events in a story, reorder the events of a story so that they are in order, and then explain how one event affects another event in a story. I hope that you are getting better at identifying transition words that show sequence in a story. And yesterday, you were able to reorder events of a story and put them in the correct order so that they sequenced the story. For today's chapter 7, here are two vocabulary words I would like you to focus on. Anonymous, when something or someone is unknown. Have you ever known someone to be anonymous? Yeah, maybe Valentine's Day when you get your Valentine, sometimes those are anonymous. Our second word is suspended, to be hanging from something. So, like on the playground, when you're playing on the big equipment and you're hanging off the bars, you are suspending from the bars. Chapter 7, a teeny tiny case. Business was slow. Doyle and Fossey, science detectives, hadn't had a case in a week, not even a phone call. The word on the streets was that Frisco was slashing his prices. No interest, no payments till next year, but that was just a rumor. If truth be known, Frisco was grounded. No phone calls, no TV, no computer, and above all, no science for a week, screamed his mother. Not until you stop testing your hypotheses on your little sister. Rumor or no rumor, Drake didn't let slow business keep him from science. And on this particularly pleasant afternoon, he was smack dab in the middle of a scientific breakthrough. The solution in the beaker churned and bubbled, smelling like stinky cheese on a summer's day. Whew. The phone rang. Drake put his experiment aside. Business was business. It paid the bills. Breakthroughs would have to wait. Besides, he was feeling a mite queasy from the smell of the stinky cheese. Doyle and Fossey. Nothing. Doyle and Fossey. Drake again. Said again. Finally, after what seemed ages, a tiny voice spoke. Drake? Speaking. Who is this? It's Lily Crump. Lily Crump was the tiniest girl in the 5th grade. Even her voice was tiny, more like a squeak. Oh, hi, Lily, Drake said as he pushed up his glasses. Now speak up. What seems to be the problem? No problem, really. You see, I've just received an anonymous love letter, and it's my very first love letter ever. I need you to help me find out who it's from. I'm desperate. Normally, Drake didn't take cases that involved love. After all, he couldn't measure love. He couldn't even put it in a test tube. All right, let's pause there, friends. Over here on page 44, in the second paragraph, why do you think the author has parentheses around this paragraph? Did you think that it's like the narrator telling us a secret in the story? That's what I think it is. Yeah. And then who do you think is telling the story in this chapter? Yeah, the narrator's telling us the story, maybe from Drake's point of view, because up here's another set of parentheses where the narrator's kind of like giving us some inside information without really telling us. And it says, besides, he was feeling a mite queasy from the smell of stinky cheese. So it's like he's letting us know that Drake really isn't feeling that well, but leading us through the story from Drake's point of view. Let's continue. But business was business. It paid the bills. Check, he said. I'll be right there. Click. Drake phoned Nell. My breakthrough on how to take the stink out of cheese will have to wait. Meet me at Lily Crump's house right away. Scientist Nell. We've got a desperate case to solve, and we're desperate. Right. Click. At Lily's house, Drake and Nell examined the letter. They held it up to the light. They sniffed it. They peered at it through their magnifying glass. Dear Lily, you are pretty. I like the way you comb your hair. You got nice front teeth. Love, your secret admirer. P.S. It's okay that your voice squeaks. Charming, said Nell. Astounding, said Drake. Naturally, you would want to know who sent this to you, added Nell. Where did you find it? I found it in my desk right after I came in from recess today, said Lily. Drake pushed up his glasses. I had a similar case once. I know just what to do. First, Nell and I will need to return to the lab. I'm afraid we'll have to take the letter. Evidence, said Nell. Lily nodded. I understand. Scientist Nell and I must conduct further analysis. Expect our report within 24 hours, Drake said as he rushed out the door. Back in the lab, Drake pulled a book off the shelf. He flipped through the pages until he found the right chapter. Anonymous letter detection. What to do when you're in love, when your love life is sinking fast. After they finished reading the chapter, Drake and Nell looked at each other. Looks like we'll need to go into action, said Drake. Check, answered Nell. Tomorrow at school we'll gather more evidence. Let's pause there. Friends, can you describe Lily Crump from what we've learned so far? And use some of the dialogue from the story to help support your answers. Yeah, if you look at some of the dialogue, especially up here at the top of page 47, it says, I found it in my desk after I came in from recess today. That type print is very small, and if you remember, the author described Lily as small and tiny, short and thin. And so we can imagine and infer that Lily Crump is a small girl in 5th grade. We learned that on page 45. And that the author is really giving us some good character traits of her. Let's continue. The next day, Drake and Nell sat on the grass during recess. Between them lay a mound of assorted pins, each one carefully labeled. How did it go? Asked Nell. Did you have any problems getting pins from everyone? Only from Baloney, answered Drake. He pushed up his glasses. When I asked to borrow his favorite pen, Baloney sat on me and threatened to squeeze my eyes out. Fortunately, when he left, his pen was lying on the floor beside me. Wow, whispered Nell, the dangers of science. Baloney was the biggest kid in the 5th grade. Even his elbows were big. His real name was Bubba Mahoney, but everyone called him Baloney. Usually, Drake used his scientific sense and stayed away from Baloney, but business was business. Drake knew that a great scientist must put aside his emotions and stick to his goal, even if it means being sat on. Now, said Drake, it is obvious to me that since the letter was written in black ballpoint ink, we can immediately remove all the pens that aren't black. How many does that leave us? A moment, please. Nell tested the pens on a piece of scratch paper. Out of the original 28 pins, we are left with 19. 9 down, 19 to go. Affirmative. Once school was out, Drake and Nell rushed to the laboratory. All afternoon they worked. They cut long strips of paper. They labeled each strip. Elliot Zelder. Nell wrote across the top of one strip using the pen labeled Elliot Zelder. On the bottom of the same strip, she drew a heavy dot. Baloney, wrote Drake on another strip with Bubba Mahoney's pen. James Frisco, Nell wrote with Frisco's pen, and so on. When all the strips were labeled, they hung the bottom of each strip in separate beakers of alcohol. Finally, they cut a strip from the love letter. At the bottom of the love letter strip was the heart drawn in black ink. They suspended the end in another beaker of alcohol. And then they waited and waited and waited. Hot chocolate? Asked Mrs. Doyle as she peeked into the lab. No thanks, said Drake. Just muffins. Coffee decaf black? Said Nell. Affirmative, replied Mrs. Doyle. And soon she returned with muffins and a steaming cup of coffee. Then, as Drake and Nell watched, rainbows of color slowly crept up the strips of paper. Purples, reds, golds, pinks, and blues. It was really quite lovely. Finally, Drake and Nell compared the different strips to the strip cut from Lily's love letter. Analysis complete, said Drake. Out of the 19 strips we tested, only 2 matched the ink in the love letter. Nell scratched her head, obviously thinking hard. One of the matching strips belongs to the spelling bee champion, and the love letter was filled with spelling errors, so it couldn't possibly be him, which means that Drake and Nell gasped with surprise as they read the name on the last matching strip. We've found our man, they said together. All right, friends, we're going to stop there for today. I hope that you enjoyed that chapter and some of the scientific things that Drake and Nell were doing. Remember, you're going to meet with your teacher today, and these are some of the discussion questions that you might want to be prepared for. Why is the second paragraph on page 44 in parentheses? Remember, we talked about how it might be the narrator sneaking in and giving us some inside stuff that's going on? Yeah. And who is telling the story in this chapter? And how do you know? And then just that describing Lily Crump, maybe some character traits that you learned by what the author was doing in the story and the description words. Make sure to use that dialogue from the story to help support your answer when you're discussing today. For today's assignment, you will be doing a Unit 1A Week 2 exit ticket. There will be a short little passage to read and then a couple questions to answer. Make sure to get that done so that your teacher has your responses today. And let's take a quick peek at our learning intention and criteria again. So we've been learning how to describe how one part of a story builds on another, and I think you guys have got it. You're using those sequence words, you're using text evidence to support your thoughts, and then you've been able to identify transition words that show sequence. You're starting to be able to explain the sequence of events in a story, and then you're able to now take parts of a story and put them in order, sequence order, so that you are making sure that the parts of the story are building on one another in the way that they're happening in the story. And then explaining how one event affects another event throughout the story. And as you see through the gasping garbage, there's a lot of events that's building and building on, and it's just getting more intense and mystery. All right, friends, that's it for today. And remember, sometime today, read for fun for at least 20 minutes. See you next time. Bye.